Have you ever noticed how certain words change the entire temperature of a moment? Not compliments, not flirting, not even physical attraction. Just a sentence. A simple sentence spoken calmly by an older man. And suddenly, something shifts. Why does that happen? Why does confidence delivered quietly feel different from confidence performed loudly? I've observed something over the years, not in theory, not in books alone, but in real conversations, real rooms, real dynamics. There's a specific way some older men speak that younger women struggle to resist. It's not money, it's not status, it's not even looks. It's how they respond when tested. And they are always tested. Here's the question most people don't ask. When a woman says, "You're too old for me," what is she really measuring? Is she measuring age, or is she measuring stability? Think about it. When that line lands in a conversation, most men react. Some shrink, some over-explain, some try to prove they're still young, but a rare few do something different. They don't argue, they don't defend, they don't impress. They stay still. And in that stillness, something powerful happens. Because attraction is rarely about numbers, it's about emotional gravity. Let me explain. In psychology, we know that emotional regulation signals strength. A person who doesn't flinch under mild social pressure communicates something without saying it. I am comfortable in my skin. That's rare. And rare is attractive. Now here's where it gets interesting. Younger women often associate older men with authority, experience, and direction, not because of fantasy, because of pattern recognition. Stability feels safe. Calm feels safe. But safety alone isn't seductive. What makes it magnetic is this. When an older man responds to "you're too old" with relaxed amusement instead of tension, he reframes the power dynamic instantly. He doesn't chase approval. He doesn't try to earn worth. He implies it. There's a subtle line I've heard that works almost unfairly well. She says, "You're too old for me." He smiles slightly and says, "That's what makes it interesting." And then he changes the subject. No pressure, no performance, no insecurity leaking through the cracks. Just grounded presence. Why does that hit so hard? Because it flips the script. Instead of asking, "Am I acceptable to you?" he's communicating, "I'm comfortable either way." That emotional independence is what people respond to. Stoic philosophy talks about this idea often. You cannot control external judgment. You can only control your response. Most men tried to control perception. The composed man controls himself. And that difference is visible. Let's go deeper. When someone challenges you about age, what are they really doing? They're testing for fragility. They're asking silently, "Will this shake you? Will you try to convince me? Will you need my validation?" The moment you explain your worth, you lower it. The moment you defend your age, you make it a weakness. But when you treat it like neutral information, you transform it into quiet power. There's another line that creates a shift. She says, "You're too old for me." He replies, gently amused, "That's one way to look at it." Pause. Then he continues talking about something meaningful. He doesn't debate the frame. He doesn't accept it fully. He simply widens it. This works because it communicates mental maturity. It says, "I don't live inside one interpretation." And here's where most men miss it. Younger women aren't looking for younger energy from older men. They're looking for contrast. If they wanted chaos, they'd date someone their age. What stands out is composure. What stands out is a man who doesn't scramble to reposition himself when lightly challenged. There's a grounded calm that comes from someone who has lived long enough to understand that opinions are weather. They pass. And when a man embodies that, he becomes steady in a world full of volatility. That steadiness feels rare. Now, let me ask you something honestly. When someone questions your age, what part of you reacts first? The ego? The fear of rejection? The need to stay relevant? Be honest, because the reaction is the signal. Older men who become magnetic don't resist the reality of time. They integrate it. They don't say, "I'm not old." They say, without words, "I've lived." There's weight in that. Weight doesn't rush. Weight doesn't explain. Weight doesn't flinch. And here's the paradox. The less you try to convince someone that you're desirable, the more desirable you appear. Why? Because persuasion signals uncertainty. Calm signals certainty. There is another phrase that works beautifully. She says, "You're too old for me." He responds, softly amused, "I don't feel old." That's it. No elaboration, no defense, just self-reference. It subtly communicates something powerful. My identity doesn't depend on your label. That's emotional independence. And independence is intoxicating. Psychologically, humans are drawn to people who appear self-contained, not closed, not distant, but whole. When a man responds from wholeness instead of insecurity, he becomes intriguing. She begins to wonder, why isn't he affected? What does he know that I don't? Curiosity replaces dismissal, and curiosity is the doorway to attraction. This isn't about manipulation, it's about internal alignment. If you secretly believe age is a liability, your tone will betray you. If you genuinely see it as experience, your posture will reflect that. And posture speaks louder than any line ever could. There's something deeply attractive about someone who has nothing to prove. Not because they're arrogant, but because they're settled. Settled within themselves. That energy is rare. And rare things draw attention without effort. So the real question isn't, what should I say when she calls me old? The real question is, why does that comment disturb me in the first place? Because once that no longer disturbs you, your words will naturally change. And so will the outcome.
Let's go further. Because the words themselves are not the real secret. It's the frame behind them. Most men think attraction is built by saying the perfect line. It isn't. It's built by holding the right posture internally. When a younger woman says, "You're too old," she's rarely delivering a verdict. She's observing. She's probing. She's seeing how solid you are. And here's something subtle. If she truly believed age was a complete deal breaker, she wouldn't be there having the conversation. She wouldn't tease it. She wouldn't bring it up playfully. The mention itself is often an invitation to reveal character. So what does character look like in that moment? It looks relaxed. It looks amused. It looks grounded. There's a certain tone older men use when they're comfortable with themselves. It's slower, measured, unhurried, not trying to impress. That rhythm alone communicates experience. Think about it. Youth competes. Experience observes. Youth reacts. Experience responds. When she challenges your age and you respond with something like, "That's fair," followed by a soft smile, you're doing something powerful. You're not resisting reality, you're absorbing it. And absorption is strength. Stoic philosophy teaches something simple but difficult. If something is true, accept it. If it's an opinion, let it pass. Age is factual, but too old is interpretation. When you don't fight interpretation, you deprive it of energy. That's when the dynamic shifts. Now let's explore the psychology underneath this. Attraction often grows in the presence of uncertainty, not insecurity, uncertainty. When a woman expects you to feel slightly destabilized, and you don't, her prediction fails. And when predictions fail, curiosity begins. Curiosity creates attention. Attention creates emotional investment. That's the quiet chain reaction. There's another response that works almost invisibly. She says, "You're too old." You tilt your head slightly and say, "Maybe." Then you hold eye contact just a second longer than usual. Then you move on. No explanation, no correction. That maybe introduces mystery. It refuses to argue. It refuses to concede. It simply exists. And existence without defense is confidence. But here's the deeper layer most people overlook. Older men who are magnetic aren't trying to be younger. They don't mimic slang. They don't overplay humor to seem relevant. They don't compete with youth. They embody contrast. Contrast creates polarity, and polarity creates attraction. A younger man might react quickly, nervously, trying to regain control of the moment. An older man who understands himself leans back emotionally, not physically always, but internally. He lets the comment breathe. Silence is powerful when it isn't anxious. And here's something important. Women are highly attuned to emotional shifts. They can feel tension before it's spoken. If your chest tightens when she says it, she senses it. If your jaw hardens, she senses it. If you start explaining your gym routine, she senses the insecurity underneath. But when your body remains loose, when your tone stays level, when your eyes don't dart away, you communicate something far beyond age. You communicate grounded masculinity. Not the loud kind, the settled kind. There's a difference. Settled masculinity doesn't need to dominate. It doesn't need to correct. It doesn't need to win. It simply stands. And standing calmly in the face of light challenge is attractive because it signals leadership without force. Leadership in conversation is subtle. It's the ability to redirect energy. For example, she says, "You're too old." You smile slightly and say, "And yet, here we are." Then you ask her something meaningful, not about age, about perspective, about ambition, about something real. You elevate the conversation. And when you elevate the conversation, you elevate yourself. Because now the focus shifts from surface differences to depth. Depth is where experience shines. That's the advantage older men forget they have. You've lived longer. You've failed more. You've recovered more. You've seen cycles repeat. There's a calm that comes from surviving seasons. And that calm is attractive when it's worn lightly. Not preached, not flaunted, just present. Let's talk about emotional self-sufficiency. This is the trait that quietly overwhelms insecurity. If you need her approval to feel valuable, she will feel the pressure of that need. If you enjoy her company but don't depend on it, she feels the freedom. Freedom is seductive. Pressure is not. So when she tests your age, what she's really testing is this: do you need me to validate you? If your answer internally is no, your external behavior will align automatically. You won't rush. You won't overcompensate. You won't shrink. You'll stay steady. And steadiness feels rare in modern dating. There's noise everywhere. Over-texting, over-talking, over-proving. The older man who resists that noise stands out simply because he's quiet in his certainty. There's another subtle phrase that carries weight. She says, "You're too old." You respond calmly, "I've earned every year." Then you let it sit. That line reframes age from liability to accomplishment. Not aggressively, not defensively, just matter of fact. It signals pride without arrogance. And pride rooted in lived experience feels different from ego rooted in insecurity. One is heavy, the other is grounded. Let me ask you something directly. Do you see your age as decline or as depth? Your answer to that question determines everything. Because if you secretly believe you're competing with younger men, you will always feel behind. But if you understand you're offering something different, not competing, the energy changes. You stop trying to match speed. You start setting tone. And tone always outlasts speed. The reason certain words from older men become irresistible is not because they're clever, it's because they're delivered without hunger. Desperation repels, contentment attracts. When you're content with who you are, you don't chase validation, you don't rush connection, you allow it. And allowing is powerful, because it communicates abundance. Abundance of experience, abundance of perspective, abundance of self-trust. Self-trust might be the most attractive trait of all. When a man trusts himself, his decisions slow down, his speech steadies, his reactions soften. He becomes less reactive and more intentional. Intentional energy feels safe and exciting at the same time. Safe because it's controlled, exciting because it's rare. So maybe the real shift isn't about what you say when she calls you too old. Maybe it's about who you become before she ever says it. Because once you truly accept time, once you stop fighting the calendar, once you see your years as evidence instead of erosion, her comment loses its sting. And when it loses its sting, it loses its power over you. And when it loses its power over you, something else takes its place. Presence. And presence is difficult to ignore.
There's one more layer to this, and it's quieter than the rest. Because the most irresistible thing an older man can say is not a line. It's a position. A position that says, without aggression, I am not in competition with time. Think about how rare that is. Most people are racing something. Aging, status, relevance, approval. But the man who has made peace with his years moves differently. He doesn't rush connection. He doesn't panic at resistance. He doesn't shrink at comparison. He listens. And when he finally speaks, his words feel weighted. Not heavy, weighted. There's a difference. Here's something I've seen repeatedly. When a younger woman teases an older man about his age and he responds with calm humor, that's attractive. But when he responds with calm perspective, that's unforgettable. For example, she says, "You're too old." He smiles slightly and says, "Old enough to know what matters." Then he holds her gaze. That line works because it shifts the focus. It's no longer about years. It's about clarity. Clarity is magnetic. Most people are confused about what they want, who they are, where they're going. A man who knows what matters radiates direction. Direction feels safe, and safety combined with mystery creates depth. Here's another response that carries power. You might be right. I've lived enough to be selective. That's not defensive. That's grounded. It communicates standards without hostility, and standards are attractive when they're quiet. Let's talk about something deeper. Why does emotional steadiness feel so compelling? Because in psychological terms, humans are drawn toward nervous systems that are regulated. When you're calm, you regulate the space. Your breathing slows the moment. Your tone lowers the intensity. Your presence becomes anchoring. Anchoring feels different from excitement. It's steadier, lasting. And when someone feels emotionally anchored around you, they associate you with stability. Stability builds trust. Trust builds openness. Openness builds connection. This is not about manipulation. It's about internal development. If you haven't accepted your age internally, you'll always leak insecurity externally, and people can feel that. But once you genuinely appreciate your own timeline, something shifts. You stop reacting to surface-level tests. You start responding from identity, and identity is difficult to shake. There's a subtle phrase older men sometimes use that carries quiet gravity. She says, "You're too old." He responds, softly, "Experience has its advantages." Then he lets silence do the rest. Silence is powerful when it isn't anxious. Anxious silence feels empty. Confident silence feels full. Full of self-trust, full of patience, full of composure. And composure is rare. Now let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time you felt completely at ease in your own skin? Not performing, not proving, just existing. Because that's the energy we're talking about. The energy that says, I've seen enough of life to not overreact to small things. And that perspective changes everything. There's another layer most men overlook. Younger women aren't only attracted to what you say, they're attracted to what you don't chase. If you don't chase youth, you appear timeless. If you don't chase validation, you appear secure. If you don't chase approval, you appear powerful. Chasing signals scarcity. Stillness signals abundance. And abundance is attractive. The Stoics believe that external opinions are outside your control. What's inside your control? Your response, your interpretation, your posture. When you hear, "you're too old," you can interpret it as rejection, or you can interpret it as curiosity wrapped in challenge. That interpretation shapes your energy. Energy shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcome. Here's something subtle but important. A man who is comfortable aging becomes more relaxed in conversation. He doesn't interrupt to prove knowledge. He doesn't brag about experience. He doesn't inflate stories to seem impressive. He speaks simply, directly, with less noise, and that simplicity feels mature. There's a line that captures this entire philosophy. She says, "You're too old." He replies calmly, "I've grown into myself." Let that sit. That statement reframes age as evolution, growth, integration. And growth is attractive because it signals forward movement, not decline. Decline is feared. Growth is respected. The difference is perspective. If you see aging as loss, your energy will shrink. If you see aging as refinement, your energy will sharpen. Refinement feels deliberate, intentional. There's something almost irresistible about someone who has refined themselves. Not polished for show, refined through experience. Failures survived, lessons absorbed, ego softened. That softness is important because true confidence isn't rigid, it's flexible. It doesn't snap under teasing, it bends, and bending without breaking is strength. So when she says, "You're too old," and you respond with a relaxed smile and something like, "Maybe, but I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," you're not arguing age, you're expressing alignment. Alignment with yourself, alignment with your path, alignment with your years. And alignment is deeply attractive because most people feel misaligned. They're pretending to be younger, pretending to be cooler, pretending to be unaffected. But authenticity feels different. It's steady, it's warm, it's grounded. Here's the final question. What if the real reason certain words from older men feel irresistible is because those words are backed by lived certainty? Not theory, not performance, certainty. Certainty that comes from accepting time instead of fighting it. Certainty that comes from knowing your value without needing applause. Certainty that says, "I don't need to convince you. I'm comfortable being me." When a man reaches that place, his tone changes, his posture changes, his presence changes, and suddenly, "too old" doesn't land as an insult. It lands as a detail, and details don't define you. Your self-perception does. So maybe the power isn't in the sentence you say. Maybe it's in the peace you've made with yourself. Because when you've truly grown into your years, you stop resisting time and you start embodying it.